Hello everybody, my name is Manu and welcome to another Eternal Contenders video series. Let me briefly address two things. First of all, I have way surpassed my first 500 subscribers on my channel. So while I already thanked my supporters on Facebook and Twitter for that, I want to do it in a video really quick too, especially because a lot of you are not following me on Facebook or Twitter yet and didn't get that. So once again, I'm super overwhelmed by the constant growth since I started this Eternal content, and I'm super thankful, super grateful for all the support and the compliments and kind words that I've received so far since I started doing this, and it basically keeps me going, keeps me motivated every day. It's just great to see how much you guys enjoy the stuff that I'm putting out, and also to hear how much it helps people to reach Masters the first time and improve their game overall. So that is really great because that's what I was going for with putting out that content. So yeah, thank you very much for your support so far and also for your ongoing support in the future. And if Eternal succeeds, I think this channel has a pretty big future ahead of it too, and I really hope and think that Eternal has what it takes to succeed, and this channel and the following that I've built with it will then succeed with it and keep growing and improving. So thank you very much for all the support, all the nice comments and feedback and compliments and everything that you guys leave on my videos and my social media so far. Thank you very much. This is like the greatest thing. Like, I'm super motivated to get up and like check my channel every day, see how many new subscribers I have and what new comments are out there, and try to reply to every single comment as much as possible, and also try to keep doing that with the channel growing as much as it will be possible in the future. And yeah, I just wanted to put that out there because I really noticed like how rewarding it is to get all that feedback and see the channel grow daily, and how motivating it is, and that I could really imagine myself doing something like this full time if it grows big enough to give me that opportunity, because it's just a lot of fun, and I really like the direct feedback from people, and also like getting new ideas from my followers on how to improve things and stuff like that. So here is to like an ongoing growing future, and maybe the potential to grow this into something really big and something that I can maybe at some point pursue full time, which would be amazing. Thank you so much to everyone so far and in the future. And the other thing is a little update on the whole headset thing. So it turns out the buyer that I bought from through Amazon likely was a scammer. He was the cheapest like third-party seller on Amazon, but I didn't think much of it because you know, it's Amazon, so you don't really, at least I didn't know of like any scams going on there, and figured even if there's like security built in from Amazon. So currently I filed a claim for like the product and not having received it and wait to hear back from Amazon. I've just checked the guy's feedback page. Like, he was a new seller, so there was no feedback before, but since I placed my order there have been like five feedbacks left on his account, and they were all like claiming that they didn't receive their product and it's likely like a scam, a fake. So yeah, there's that. I just ordered the headset again through Amazon directly this time, and thanks to Evening Express, it is supposed to arrive tomorrow evening between like 6 and 9 my local time. So by then the thing with the headset should finally be resolved. The audio quality should go way up with that, hopefully, and I also have a reasonable opportunity to maybe dip my toes into streaming and maybe do like a first test stream. A couple of people kept asking about me streaming for a while, so once I have a proper headset to consider that, I might actually like give it a try and see how it goes, and give you guys a chance to watch me play a bunch on live stream on Twitch. So I will leave the information as usual in the description. My Twitch channel is always linked underneath the videos, so feel free to follow me there to not miss anything, or just follow me on Twitter and Facebook, where I will usually post before going live, since I don't plan on setting up like a regular streaming schedule anytime soon and just stream whenever I feel like it and have the time to, because it's a lot of commitment compared to like the videos, which leave me a lot more flexibility in doing things the way I prefer to do them. So yeah, but I still want to like give it a try, stream a little bit, especially because people asked for it quite a bunch and seem to really want to watch me play on live stream. So yeah, that's it regarding the subscribers and the headset. So let's finally dive into the deck. My latest deck is another shadow-based midrange deck. You guys know full well that my first like big midrange success was my take on Stonescar midrange, which was a great deck, but kind of got killed by the Champion of Chaos nerfs because the deck was relying on the card as much as a defensive card as an offensive card, and now having only 3 health, dying to stuff like Torch and Sword of Vicaria, and also blocking a lot less stuff without trading, kind of made this fall apart. I recently, since then, came up with like a Feln midrange take, which has its own issues, like it has some inconsistencies because the influence is really demanding, and that can be a problem. The deck was still pretty solid and did especially well for me on ladder, but once I tried it in an ETS, it just kind of yeah, made me go 0-2 drop due to its inconsistency issues, losing some critical games to Influence Screw and some others. It really showed that the deck has to play sort of like too many removal spells and some mediocre removal spells like Permafrost to answer stuff, where the Stonescar deck had Torch and like relic weapons to answer stuff that could also pressure opponents and deal with relic weapons that traditional removal can't, so it didn't have the problem of like flooding on removal that the Feln deck had. So I was at the same time also looking into another possibility, which is Xenan Midrange, since if we look at it, like Shadow provides all like the disruptive elements. One of the big draws for me in mid-range decks to be Shadow usually is Vara's Favor and Sabotage. Vara's Favor is simply just like arguably the best Shadow card in the game, being like one of the few, like the only favor that is usually a lot of the time a hard 2-for-1, killing something and providing a power, which gives these decks a lot of like inbuilt incremental advantage. And Sabotage is like a way to take away the game-breaking cards that we otherwise can't stop before they generate like a lot of advantage for the opponent, or like the tempo swingy cards like Combat Tricks and stuff, and cheap removal that let like an aggro deck keep pulling ahead tempo-wise. So both of these elements have been very essential in these shadow-based mid-range decks, and a big draw for me to try and make them work. And yeah, time provides a lot of like good, beefy, efficient units that also can generate value, like Dawnwalker, Acolyte, Temple Scribe, and Mystic Ascendant, and like a pretty good monument. And just Titan, which doesn't generate any advantage, but it's just like the most undercosted unit in the game, basically. Alright, so let's talk about the deck in detail a bit more. So the removal suit basically is 1 Predator's Instinct, 3 Suffocate, 4 Annihilate, 4 Vara's Favor, 2 Deathstrike, and 3 Stray into Shadow. So basically, the 1 Predator's Instinct was like a way to try and fit another like fairly cheap removal in the deck that is kind of unconditional in what it kills, unlike, say, the 4 Suffocate would be. It has some nice synergy with Dawnwalker and Sandstorm Titan, and also with Ascendant. Like, you can go turn 7 Ascendant, drop a power, draw a card, put Predator's Instinct on the 6/6 Ascendant, and kill most of the units in the game on board at that time, just for 1 power to gain some tempo back, basically. And yeah, there's obviously like the interaction with Dawnwalker. Having access to 1 or 2 Predator's Instinct when you have Dawnwalkers in your deck is never bad, because if you happen to draw the Instinct with the Dawnwalker, then you can just turn the Dawnwalker into a 4/1 Overwhelm killer and keep recurring it to slowly grind down the opponent, especially against aggressive decks that you started stalling out, and then you can just wear down their board to a point where they just basically can't win anymore no matter what. And yeah, Annihilate is very well positioned right now with so many time decks running a lot of Titans and Mystic Ascendants and stuff, and even a bunch of other units. It's just a really good card right now, and Suffocate is like a necessary evil. It's one of the better ways to deal with Seraph, which is something we definitely need to answer, and it's also another way to gain on, or like not lose tempo against aggressive decks early on, having cheap ways to interact with almost all of the like 3 power or less casting cost units in the game, and even some bigger ones like Steward of the Past, for example, or Black Sky Harbinger, and so on. Just still answers a lot of relevant units very efficiently. And yeah, to Deathstrike, not great because it's very clunky, but it's a universal answer, which is always good to have in a mid-range deck that plans to go a little longer. And there's stuff like Cerso, for example, and a couple of other like units that we potentially have to get rid of, and Deathstrike gets the job done. It doesn't do it particularly tempo efficient, but it does it, which is important. And yeah, Vara's Favor I've already talked about enough, I think, at this point. And last but not least, we have Stray into Shadow. Like, initially I had 0 of those. This card basically was a nod to the otherwise very problematic Shimmer Pack matchup, especially because of Scouting Party. And Stray into Shadow gives you a really great way to like set them back, answer their Scouting Party, for example, and wipe away a couple of other like random units lying around, like Initiates and Favorites and Acolytes and stuff, and set them back significantly on board to a point where what they have left a lot of the time can be answered by spot removal and big blockers, putting us in a position where we can like play cleanup and start taking over the board with our big units and turn the table on them while they try to somehow draw back into the game and rebuild. And the card has been doing a pretty good job with this, especially because the deck has a lot of units that survive it pretty well, like Steward, Sandstorm Titan, and Ascendant, and even the Ember Monument. Initially, before I started adding Stray into Shadow, I had less Steward of the Pasts, and I was running the typical like 4 Argent Port Instigators. But unlike in the other 2 Shadow decks that were like much more aggressive, this deck rarely played out like aggressive enough for Instigator to be great. So while I was not particularly impressed and was looking for like a way to make the Shimmer Pack matchup better, I basically came up with the idea to just add more units that synergize well with Stray into Shadow, meaning namely go up to 4 Steward of the Past and get rid of the Instigators, which synergize poorly with Stray, and turn towards a slightly more controlling angle while still being a mid-range deck that is reasonably proactive. And yeah, it might seem like there's some enter synergy with cards like Dawnwalker, but that is not true. Like, Dawnwalker actually has some synergy with Drain to Shadow, because a lot of the time you can just attack, and a lot of people on ladder, not really expecting much or like playing poorly, block your Dawnwalker with their bigger guy, and then you can just stray and everything dies. Like, just earlier today, for example, I attacked against like a Shimmerpack guy. He had a Titan on board, he blocked the Dawnwalker with the Titan, thinking like, yeah, free block. And I just strayed away his Titan and the rest of his board for free there. And in like, sure, there might be like these rare cases where your opponent doesn't trade or like block your Dawnwalker and you have to stray your Dawnwalker, but that's like not a big deal. I mean, if this stray generates enough value and blows out your opponent, it's not that big of a deal that our Dawnwalker dies with it and can't come back anymore because it's like a 4-3, because you're only gonna do that if the stray is gonna do enough work, and then losing a Dawnwalker in the process is still not a big deal if the card blows out the opponent. And yet, it became even better now with the release of Arcanum Monitor. There's a lot more Praxis tokens, and there's also a fair bunch of like scrap metal decks, Callus decks, where this card is also pretty good. So there's a bunch of matchups where it's really nice. And it's even decent against Big Combre, because in these mid-range, time mid-range mirrors, one of the best, like the best card in Big Combre is Great Parliament, and a lot of decks don't have an answer to like a Parliament for like 3 or 4 owls, and Strain to Shadow is a clean answer for a Parliament of 2 to 4 owls, which is pretty important to have to be able to win a longer game against Big Combre, especially given that these basically match their Great Parliaments and our Ascendant match their Ascendants, and we have potential Dawnwalkers if they don't silence them to grind a bit with. So, and a lot of like 2-for-1 stuff like Scribe and Favor and Acolyte and incremental advantages to reasonably keep up with them. Sure, the matchup is like not great, it's slightly unfavorable, but that is still like pretty good if we have like 40-45% or something against Big Combre. Like a good Big Combre player, like against a weak Big Combre player, I'm probably even like a favorite. I actually have kind of a positive win record on ladder against Big Combre, but I know from testing that the matchup, and also like on paper, that a matchup is like at best like 40-45% for this deck, but that's still like a pretty good deal given that most other mid-range decks do worse against it, because it's kind of like the mid-range killer. So yeah, that's it with the removal suit. And now let's talk about the unit a bit. Temple Scribe has just been amazing. I mean, the guy does everything, smoothes out early draws, randomly chip shots, slow decks on an empty board, and does a lot of trading against aggressive early units like Pyronite, Oniron and stuff like that, Ember Acolytes, opposing Temple Scribes, Desert Marshals and so on. There's a bunch of like X1s that see play that Temple Scribe can happily trade with without costing us a card. It's basically like a bit like Vara's Favor 5 to 8 in like a bit of a different way. Ember Acolyte, another great card. There's either against slower decks, there's a lot of scenarios where the board is sort of empty and Ember Acolyte just can attack them for 2 a turn, backed up by like our removal and stuff, or against aggressive decks, especially like Rakano for example. There's plenty of things to block and trade, like Guanwatch Paladin, their 1-drops and stuff like that. So there is a lot of things that Ember Acolyte can do against both kinds of decks on the different ends of the spectrum. So it's often like at least 1.5 cards worth, or like even a full 2 cards value. And next we have Dawnwalker. That's also like a pretty great offense defense 3-drop. It basically either allows us to recklessly pressure our opponent into whatever board they have, forcing them to either take 4 a turn or throw away units just to get the Dawnwalker, see the Dawnwalker come back with a Titan or like a Umbren Reaper, for example, or an Ember Monument. And on defense, it's like equally annoying. Sure, it's like only blocking every other turn, but still, losing units to a recurring unit is pretty frustrating and wears down opponents pretty quickly. So this card is pretty great and is also a lot better than it might seem, because you don't need like a million ways to recur it. This deck still has like 12 ways to get it back, plus like a couple of ways to draw cards, so that's like more than enough, especially because there's will also be times where this will be silenced or stunned by a permafrost or silenced by like a Steward of the Past or turned into a cudgel by a maiden. So we don't need to have like a million ways to recur it. Having these 12 ways has been enough for me, and it's like not an aggressive like Dawnwalker deck. This is like a slightly control-ish mid-range deck that just looks for this as like a threat/value engine. And obviously for Titan, just because Titan is a great unit. I mean, it's a bit like susceptible to tempo blowouts because there's a bunch of like 2 power removal that answer it, generating 2 tempo for the opponent, but every time it doesn't get answered, it completely shuts down the opponent, so it's totally worth running. And to round out the 4-drop slot is Steward of the Past, another great roadblock that usually shuts down the opponent's offensive unanswered, and also deals with a lot of like annoying void-based stuff like Stash or Dawnwalkers and so on. So it also has a lot of utility and like utility suppression against the opponent, Entombs from Drake and Reaper and stuff like that. There's a lot this guy can do for the deck in like not getting opponents' engines out of hand. Then we have Umbren Reaper, another like solid mid-range staple, basically a great way to apply pressure in the air after our Titan died, and also a nice way to like gain back some health in the mid to late game, just by using the Reaper to trade or forcing the opponent to kill the Reaper. Also another way to get back Dawnwalker. And last but not least, Mystic Ascendant as our curved hopper and our late game advantage engine. Like after we worn down our opponent with our Dawnwalkers, Titans, Reapers and Stewards, we can like drop Ascendant as our last threat and start drawing cards when they often are out of answers. Especially because we also have Sabotage to protect it and take their last answer or something like that. And Ember Monument is sort of like a different version of Ember Acolyte, in the sense that it is both a power and a unit. While it isn't both at the same time like Ember Acolyte, it is a lot better as a unit if it is a unit, because it's a 5/5 overwhelm, so it gets back our Dawnwalker and also is a legitimate threat in its own right. And one of the things that has been really nice about this deck is how great its power base is. Like, the influence is great. The deck needs 2 time and 3 shadow to play all the cards in the deck, which is very easy thanks to Diplomatic Seal, the 8 duels, and for Ember Acolyte to fix it. And the deck also basically gets to run a ton of power without running too much power, like without flooding. The deck is basically almost never screwed or flooded, because as a protection against screw, the deck has 4 Temple Scribe, 4 Vara's Favor, and for Ember Acolyte, putting it at 34 total power cards between like actual power, Acolyte, and Favor. And if you add in Scribe, it's like 34.75-ish power, like almost 35 power. And at the same time, the deck does not feel like a 34 to 35 power deck. Like a deck like this usually needs like 32 to 33, probably with Ascendant like 33-ish power to smoothly function, and like Curve Out will have power for Ascendant often enough and stuff like that. But then you also have these draws where you like flood out and you don't have an Ascendant, or your Ascendant gets killed and you draw like a big chunk of power. And this deck doesn't have that problem because 12 of its like 34 power cards generate value. Ember Monument turns into a 5/5 overwhelm on the late game. Ember Acolyte is a body that can either like attack on an empty board or trade with like small stuff from the opponent. Same with Vara's Favor. It's power that also can clean up small units and relic weapons from the opponent. So we basically get this perfect power base that gets to run a lot of power without being punished for a lot of power, between being able to run 4 of the best Monument, Ember Acolytes for fixing, for like power drop and influence fixing, the best Favor in the game, and also Mystic Ascendant to further turn like late game power into value, which is incredible and is part of the reason why this deck feels so good and performs so well, and like plays out so smoothly, because it just has this like a lot of these built-in like dual purpose cards that protect you from flooding and screwing at the same time, and also make the influence incredibly stable. So yeah, this deck has been doing pretty well for me. I've been running at around like 60, slightly over 60% since I've started tracking it. I think I have like 130 or 150 games, not sure right now, something along those lines, so like a pretty big sample size. And I've been really happy with like how the deck plays out, and it's pretty well rounded, and possibly like the best shadow-based mid-range deck right now, and it will likely only get better once set 2 is out, which hopefully will contain a couple of like really nice and powerful Xenan cards for a deck like this to upgrade it and make it even better. So that's it for the deck. I hope you guys enjoyed the deck tech as usual, and next I'm gonna jump into a couple of ranked games with it. I'm only like gold 1 at the moment because I haven't played too much since the reset, so I'm still climbing back to Masters. But I mean, so do a lot of like other prior Masters players, so we will still probably play against plenty of like former Masters players in our games to make them as competitive as possible. Alright, that's it for the deck tech. Stay tuned for the first half of the games in a moment. Thanks for watching.